just while those scores are being tallied up, I'd like to introduce to you someone who started his business many years ago as a young person, who's also the head of the policy unit at the London Institute of Chamber and Commerce. Please welcome Ian Mason.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon to support such an important initiative. Initiatives such as this are particularly important at the moment because we have an economy that isn't growing. You've all seen it in the press. In fact, the economy hasn't been growing for nearly 2 years now. The government predicts growth of 1.2% this year. That's based on expectations that inflation will be lower this year than last year. Household consumption, people like you and I spending money in the shops, will be higher this year than last year. And not to mention the fact that the government's consumption will be down this year as opposed to being up last year. In other words, austerity is going to be harder this year than it is last year. There's been much talk in recent months about the unemployment figures. Why is the economy shrinking, but the number of people that are reported to have a job has been going up? And I don't want to add to that debate with my remarks today, but I do want to say that it's clear that many of those jobs are registered as either part-time or self-employed, which means that while people are registered on the government's list as being in work, they're still struggling. And that's why today's gathering is so important, because enterprises such as those that are in the room, such as my own, such as members of the Chamber of Commerce, of which I represent, must become sustainable if the economy is going to recover. The problem with that, as I'm sure many of you will attest to, is that startups face many barriers. As I know from my own experience, certainly. You have an idea, but you might not know how to record business finance, and you might not be able to afford an accountant to tell you how to do it. You might need cash to grow, but you have no idea how to put together a case for the bank, or you might just be intimidated by walking in there in the first place. Until you can afford to hire your own staff, you have to do everything yourself. You have to produce your own product or service, package it, market it, sell it, collect the payments, chase the money of the people that inevitably don't pay you, and then deal with the complaints afterwards. All the while, you still have to focus on how your business is going to grow over the next few years. I don't know if anyone here thinks they possess all of those skills. I know I certainly don't, and I don't think many of the entrepreneurs across the country do either. And that's the single biggest barrier to entrepreneurship in the UK. How do you learn all of those things by yourself? So my first piece of advice is to avoid being so proud of your business that you miss the chance to gain expertise from somebody else, whether that be a friend, a member of the family that might be able to help you out, or just someone that you might want to partner with that can do things that you can't. I always go around telling this story because it's very topical at the moment. It's about banks, so everyone's going to like it. Last summer, I looked for finance for my business from a bank. I just completed the business plan for the year ahead and realised that my expansion plans would require 3 months of negative cash flow, and obviously for that I would need an overdraft. So I approached my relationship manager, and I emphasise relationship manager there, with a full business plan, the relevant financials and so on. But you have to do this online, so you fill in a form online, and it took 4 weeks for someone to come back to me. 4 weeks for someone to come back to me. So it was a mumbled voicemail message, which I replied to promptly, and then had to wait another 2 weeks to get that person to call me back again. I'm not the best, I'm not very patient, so that wouldn't go down very well with me. But it made it worse because the chap that called me was in a call centre on the other side of the UK. Didn't know the place where I was calling from, didn't know anything about the local economy. But worse still, he'd not read anything of the information that I sent over to him, illustrated by the fact that he asked why my revenues were depressed in August. Absolutely nothing on the cash flow for August. And what I haven't told you is my company does educational publishing, so a large proportion of my sales go into schools who are on holiday in August. So a further grumble along the lines of, I'll get back to you, I waited yet again another month for a response, and the response, as you can probably gather by now, was an inevitable no. So that's, if you've been counting, 10 weeks from the initial inquiry to the no. Had I put in a formal application? No. So when the banks tell you we're lending money, what they don't tell you is there's a lot of people that are showing the door before you even get a chance to apply. As I say, I've been grumpy all the way through this, but by the time I got to that stage, I was very grumpy. I walked down the high street to a local branch of another bank, met my local relationship manager, actually was local because he was there, met him in person, and received what I wanted within a week. So, as if to demonstrate that, my second piece of advice to people in the room looking or already have started their own businesses is that you will be told no by so many people for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it could be justified, sometimes it can't be. In this particular case, my business was running a 67% net profit margin. So that's money after all costs have been paid. There was a profit there. And I think you have to be ready to face that level of rejection. So people will say no to you, no matter how confident you are, that still affects you. So this is the second piece of advice. Now, moving on, your business takes off, you're doing quite well. You're going to encounter 1,000,001 different problems, completely different to the first set. You've got staff to manage. Anyone who's done that knows the problems that might incur. Premises to look after, customers and yet more complaints, very few of which in my experience are well-founded, but you still have to deal with them because it's your reputation or something like that. And as you grow, you spend less and less time trying to grow, and more time trying to survive. And that's what kills so many startups. If you grow too fast, you might not be able to cope with the expansion, which sounds ridiculous, but so many businesses I know have folded because of that. Or even worse, actually, is that you end up suffering reputational damage because you can't provide the customers with the level of service that you wanted. Grow too slowly, and you might not be able to survive. Your revenue's not coming in to meet your growth plans, or your growth plans aren't working, then you might not be able to survive. So, if all this seems a little daunting, it perfectly illustrates the central message that I wanted to get across to you all today, and that's the value of mentoring to an entrepreneur. I'm absolutely delighted that I can support the launch of this incubator, and I'm looking forward to working with some of the startups as a mentor myself. I think you may have noticed that I have a bit of a habit when talking about business and the economy to be slightly depressing. So let me leave you with a positive thought. That should be the first for me. It can be done. No matter what you say, no matter all the barriers that I've just thrown up there, you can do it. And to illustrate that, I started my first business 4 years ago with no capital investment, no money at all, nothing. I got a free website. I used every single bit of the profits I made from that, rolled it back into the business, invested, move on, and so you go on. It's a slow way of doing things, but it's certainly a way of doing things, and I think it's the way that a lot of people in this country will have to take, because there isn't money growing on trees. 4 years later, my business turns over just shy of £5 million a year. I employ 12 full-time members of staff, and I get the pleasure of talking to people like you about my experiences. So it can be done. Could have just waited, couldn't it, until I finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you.